Thanks, Karim, for sitting here with me today to talk about Palestine. And I was thinking from your unique perspective, given your lived experience, including, of course, your activism in the justice system in the United States, that you might be able to offer us some renewed insight into what's happening in Palestine, specifically the American support for the Israeli-led violence we're seeing there right now. So I'm wondering maybe if we can start off talking a little bit about what you might see as similar between the American carceral system and the kind of cruelty, American-sponsored cruelty that we're seeing in Palestine.
So historically, right, America hasn't condemned what's going on in Palestine, right? Nor has America condemned what has went on in the American carceral system.
Right.
They have just okayed it and continued to do it repeatedly. So for me, the connection from my experiences of going to prison, the reasons why I went to prison, seeing what happens in my community for marginalized people, it's a certain class of people that don't get to be humans, right? So as we watch, and today, it's been going on for about a year, right? We're coming up on a year since, well, historically it's been longer than that.
Right.
But the mass murder of children, and we watch it on social media. They're televising this at this stage. And to me, it feels like we have to be desensitized to brown people dying. When there's a killing in America of a Black person, we watch it on social media, right? So we normalize these things, and we have to accept the power structure. So who's in the power structure, right? Netanyahu hasn't been condemned by the American government. The American government hasn't sanctioned Netanyahu. In fact, they have doubled down. They continue to say, oh, we want to cease fire. But how can you cease fire if you continue to send the weapons? So the intelligence of the people is continuously played on. And that's what, that connection of war, right? All wars are related. So it has to be somebody that we're at war against. But war in the conventional sense usually means that I can fight back, right? Mm-hmm. But we're at a stage where how we watch war today, it's just bullying and murdering defenseless people.
Yes.
At this stage. So in the prison system, people go to prison, they have billions of dollars to send you to prison, right? Mm-hmm. Black people, the war on drugs, the war on different communities, they have the weight of the government behind them, no matter what. So the people in the community, I don't want to go up against that. Hip hop artists don't want to speak about what's going on. Right. Because why? Right? They don't want to lose their positions. They don't want to go up against the system. And they don't speak out against a music genre, because my background is music and hip hop, that was for, I don't want to say rebels, but speaking up for the oppressed, has been silent about certain issues. Yes. And that's not by coincidence.
And you said something interesting, that certain people or certain populations are seen as expendable by American power. I'm just wondering if you could elaborate on that and how maybe it connects with this kind of cruelty we're seeing in Palestine.
Well, it's called racism, right? Racism or classism affects people all over the world, right? Colonialism, by saying you're not entitled to your lands. Look at the immigration crisis in America right now. Where are these people coming from? Where are this lower class, quote unquote, people coming from? What happened in those countries to create the conditions? We don't address those issues. We don't speak on those issues. We try to play the, what's the game that we're playing? The race, right? So we're in this race and we're trying to say, well, I'm better than you, right? If you're of a lighter complexion, you're better, right? And as you go up, you become better by color alone. Then there's capitalism. So that connection is always there when it comes to color. And we won't identify, you have Muslims in America that haven't, like Black Muslims that haven't spoken about publicly about what's going on in Palestine, right? We don't feel like our issues connect because we're of a different color. We're not saying those are my Muslim brothers in Palestine and we're taking that issue up. It's a non-issue because my problems are bigger than yours. But eventually it comes to your doorstep because it's just a practice.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because when I was preparing for this interview, I was thinking, is this what we're seeing in Palestine? Is this America, or is this a dimension of America? And what I'm trying to get at is that, like, in your view, is what's happening in Palestine, the support for the Israeli-led violence, is that representative of America, or is that some kind of anomalous behavior that doesn't align?
I wouldn't say it represents America per se, but rather an agenda, right? And this agenda could be a global agenda by a selected few, right? That have this agenda of how they envision the world, right? That they should take this land and this land belongs to them. Or historically, if you go to Haiti, right? If you go to some of these countries, people have claimed their lands and created conditions for them to live in that are inhumane. So is it an American thing or is it a greed thing? America is just the country that is the marketing focal point for greed. So this greed in support of what greed harbors, death, theft, is normalized, right? And sometimes American people start to embody that programming, right? I'm a bully because yes, I'm a bully, yes. And if I take what's yours, you shouldn't ask for it, yes. Right? You have no right to it once I've taken it.
Yeah, I think it's such an important. I think you're touching on something so important. It's this sort of American or Western view that I can take, and you bear the costs, or I'm entitled to this, and other people will suffer that, quote unquote, don't matter. And no, I think you characterize it well. To your credit, you had or just being a courageous person, I should say, you decided to take on this system when you were in Alabama. And I'm wondering if you can speak to, like, what happened in that time and how you made the decision to take on this system that you saw as also cruel and unjust within American empire.
Well, long before I got to Alabama, I've always kind of been with the underdog, right? How I went to federal prison is because I chose the underdog in a fight against some powerful people at the time. That would be 50 Cent, and choosing, somebody from my neighborhood, Bangum Smurf, to say, well, I'm on this side, right? If I see something wrong, if I see bullying, I've always been that person. I'm never going out to seek, trouble. Right. When I'm wrong, but I've always been for the underdog, right? I don't like injustice. So when it was happening to me in the conditions, naturally, that's how I react, right? I fight. I figure out how to fight, right? If you don't have the tools to fight, we can figure it out together. And I think that's just the biggest thing for people from the ghetto, like poverty. It gives you creativity, right? You have to fight and think about what can you do to get out of this situation, right? How can you have a better life? So I come from poverty, right? I migrated from Jamaica at 9, 10 years old. I have a very traumatic upbringing, but I've always been a fighter. So because of that fight that's within me, having my trials, being sentenced to 30 years, appealing that several times, winning those cases, I didn't lay down to be bullied, because if I did something that was grossly wrong and that was deserving of that sentence, I don't think in me I would have fought, right? If I step on your foot, right, or I do something to you intentionally that I know to be wrong, I will let you get your choice of punishment that one time, right? And then go about it because I know I did something wrong. In that situation, I knew that I was set up on purpose. I knew that I was being railroaded. So I had no choice but to fight. Right?
Right.
So that's what in Alabama in those conditions during COVID, putting a noose around my neck to stop, the police from coming in and shooting us, right, with rubber bullets. That was just, for me, it's natural progression, right? Because can we beat you? You have guns. How do I stop you? Right? Because now I have to go and play your game, your way. And some people say, well, you weren't really going to jump. I don't think you know me well enough to know what I'm willing to do when I'm pushed for the greater good. A lot of people don't know that in Alabama, I could have been released probably a whole year before, right? I had a claim against the institution that I could have filed that would have gotten me out of that situation. But I used that instead to help others get out.
Yes.
Right? I didn't use my claim for myself. I used it to leverage to help other people because I knew that I was there for a purpose. So whatever I'm in a space, I go for that time. And when that time is revealed on what it is that I'm here for, in Alabama, I had a lot of people that believed in me, right? That were tired and was like, I just want to be deported. I want my freedom. Right. And I'm like, well, brother, you just got to hold on for, when that time comes. And they held on. And then it proved to be true. A way out came. Miraculous things came, like people that were going back to Jamaica. Jamaica has never refused a plane, right? Mm-hmm. I have one brother, Dwayne Adi, and he was actually the person that allegedly recorded the video of me with the noose on my neck. Mm-hmm. And Jamaica refused the plane with him on it. The following week, he would win an appeal on his case that we filed 3 years before that. And then he's now free here with his family and his kids because of decisions we made to fight. The fight now is, I don't want to say it's easier, but it's a different fight. Freedom is a different fight than being incarcerated and being served 3 free meals. But this is a level of incarceration in this system, in the world, of how humans can't move around, right? How we have to go to work every day and be subjected to different forms of human rights violations, forced labor, whatever it is in the workplace, that we have to fight and play this game. And it wears and tears on people, but I have this comparison that I am not really free. Just because I've been released from confinement, I am not really free.
You're describing it so well, like you were in the thick of it and you had to sort of help other people, or they were coming to you and you were mobilizing them. Like, is there anything that you can speak to in terms of what you may have learned there about actually mobilizing people who are not in the thick of it, who are not facing life and death situations and are living comfortably so they can do what's morally right, what's just, and fight for justice in Palestine, or against really any of the kind of American-sponsored cruelty we're seeing in the world, whether it's local or abroad?
So this is something I think about often, right? And it was never easy for me to mobilize different groups of people. You have MS-13, you have African, you have different people from different cultures. And that there is a racism or a prejudice amongst different cultures. And to mobilize all those different cultures, I had to go through it at times. When it was a time for a hunger strike, I would have to say, well, I'm going to go on this hunger strike by myself, whether you come or not, right? So I have to be willing to put my best foot out there and do it first. The thing about it is, when you coming into prison, having phones, I had elders who told me, hey, we didn't have phones or TVs or certain things 20 years ago, right? We had to fight for these things. Yeah. right? So the privileges that you have today, somebody sacrificed and somebody died for. A lot of the things that we see happening in Palestine, like the where's daddy technology, and which you're familiar with that basically says they find the father, they track the father to the home, and when the dad goes home, they bomb the home, right? Basically eradicating bloodlines. So when we see those things, right, if we allow that to happen to others, there's a day that it comes to our doorstep.
Yes.
So anytime I had issues in prison or I saw somebody that didn't speak English having an issue with an officer, I would step up and step in. That also gave strength to other people. Like, he's stepping up for our causes.
Yes.
Right? He's not Hispanic, right? He's stepping up for my people. So I always had their support when it was time to do certain things, even with a little bit of argument, but I had that in my back pocket. Yeah. So people knew, hey, I'm willing to go for you. Are you willing to go for me? Yes. Because I'm going for all of us. It's not just a me thing. It's not about individualism. Right. So when you realize that once that officer or that official or that person with an authority finds power in his oppression, yeah. right? Because once he does it to this guy, he feels good, right? This is what bullies do. Yeah. It feels good. This is like the character like 50 Cent. Once he does the bullying, right, and he gets away with it one time, he's emboldened by it, so he continues that behavior, right? That's a major part of the story. One of the reasons why I had so much respect for Daniel Khalees Bangham-Smurf, he was somebody that fought for food while he was on tour, right? While they were being fed McDonald's sandwiches, half grown men on tour supporting 50 Cent, he fought for better food, right? As somebody that was high ranking in the group, he didn't have to come out and fight for people. But when he had the dispute, the guys that he supported and got the food for was happy that he was gone, because now they can possibly take his position, right? And then what happened to them? They never got the position and they never got the food. And they didn't gain anything from it, because the bully understood that this guy was standing up for you. You didn't stand up for him.
I think you're touching on something, or you're almost, without even maybe realizing, it's like you're alluding to why there is what's happening, in big part what's happening in Gaza and Palestine, because there is no check on that.
Yeah, it's not my issue. Yes. That's the thing. That is not my issue. If I see something happening to you, that's not my issue. Yeah. How does that affect me? How does that bother me?
Yes.
Right? And as long as it doesn't bother you, when it comes to your doorstep, you won't have support.
Because it's not just, there's a visceral component to it, like people are feeling, the people who actually do something, they're feeling, compelled to do it. And I think what you're saying also is really interesting too, because once you have that idea that's at the fore of your mind, that this one day will come to my doorstep if I don't do it now, you might not show it externally, but within yourself, it elicits a certain kind of emotion, prompts you to action. But I think this has been such a great discussion. Is there any final observations or thoughts you have about any of this? Even if you want to talk about some of the great activism that you're doing right now.
I hate to talk about myself. You were part of my campaign and the work I did to get out. One of the things I hate to do is talk about what I've done, because I don't think I'm complete yet, right? I'm just still in the fight, and I'm getting new information, and Allah has blessed me in time to gather things. I was talking to my nephew / my business partner earlier, who's also Bangham-Smurf's son. His name is Todd Banks. And I'm giving him these examples because he's a child who, for him, he lost his father to the system, not just the criminal justice system or hip hop music, but also to deportation, right? So he went from being in this area of, 50 Cent is my godfather, right? To now my dad is deported and I'm in the circumstances and I'm coming up in this household without a father, right?
Right.
And I have to learn these things on my own. I have to learn about life. Every male figure that you had was taken away from you from a young age. And trying to make him reconcile with that, he makes music so he expresses himself in that form. But teaching him certain things, a quote from, Kevin Aller, who recently got released. He said to me one day while I was in prison, like I was really young. They were already in prison. I went to prison at 21, right? 20, turning 21. And crazy, I'm like, I'm going to trial. I'm taking on the federal government, right? And they're like, don't do it, right? Don't do it. They're going to railroad you. He said to me one day, I'd rather see a black woman die than a white woman cry, right? And I was explaining this to Ty Banks and letting him know, like, hey, there's a reason why that was said. Everybody will hear that statement and be like, what did you just say? Right? People will be in uproar about what was said, but that is the reality of marginalized communities. Because when a black woman dies, she dies, right? When a white woman cries, a lot of black people die. So when you hear, when America is wronged or Israel is crying and saying, whoa, something happened at this moment, right? Look at all the brown children that are dying. Look at the difference in that, right? Look at the impact of that. You can kill over 3,000 children and it's still not enough.
It's almost, what's the way of putting it? Bizarre, or I'll just say it's difficult to reconcile, because it's so true what you're saying. At the same time, over the last 10 years or so, there seems to have been within America all these movements, good movements, social justice movements around women, anti-racism. But when it comes to Palestine, though, it's like, how can you, if you're for all these movements, how is it that when Palestine is under the foot of the American empire, you're not saying anything? This network's not saying anything, or this artist isn't using their platform. Like, it is so weird to see that.
Well, there's this thing, right? Why I don't want to say I don't believe in these movements.
Yes.
The issue with these movements are who finances them, right? Where's the money coming from? One party or the next, right? A lot of nonprofits lost, I want to call it income or funding, when Donald Trump was no longer the president, right?
Yeah.
When he is the president, you have all the money in the world to go fight and push out these different agendas. So it's like a 1-2 combination between these parties, right? I come from Jamaica. I know what the party system is all about. I know how the parties play, right? They're colleagues. When the money that finances all of this dictates what the agenda is, right? What are the issues right now, right? Who is giving up the money to fight against what's going on in Palestine, in America, right?
Right.
Where would the money normally come from? Who controls the banking system? Like, let's take record labels for a second and say, like, those are Zionists. They give out the worst loans, right? Artists don't have a voice. They're forever in debt. They don't get trade history for the loans, right? So I own you. Hip hop artists don't own hip hop, right? You can create something, but you have no ownership in it. So the movement of what you're crying about, and you're saying, whoa, I'm going through this thing. It's, here's the money, shut up, don't talk about this until I tell you to talk about it. It's not an issue until we say it's an issue, because we're not going to fund that.
It's really interesting, because a lot of these, the funding is there. It's not like coming just strictly from the grassroots without, or if it does, often enough it gets hijacked.
It gets hijacked.
Yeah.
That's been the model, right?
Yeah.
Forever, like COINTELPRO, like these things that people might look at me and say, oh, well, you're talking about hip hop and relating that and comparing that to this. These are micros and macros. But look at the nexus, at the people that is involved in it, right? Look at who is at the hierarchy in the music and entertainment industry, right? Not to say anything about the Diddy situation, but who do they say were his handlers? This man got away with these things for 30 years, but he's still the only person indicted, right? Look at the Epstein case, right? The people off those lists aren't being indicted.
It's right. It's actually really frightening.
Right? So it's a scapegoat. You take your lick and you keep going because this is organized crime. These are the real gangsters. I've sat in prison and watched it with my own eyes what the U.S. government does with the Colombian cartels, how it works. I watched them.
It really resonates with me what you're saying for what it's worth, because like something I've been thinking about, for example, is like how can someone get, you know, like a 10-year sentence for possession of whatever, and Netanyahu's got nothing. He's got nothing. And this is like happening in real time across the world 24/7.
Well, that's what
everyone is seeing it, and there's not even a day in prison. It's just
what it spells out is that psychopaths that are like, well, if I'm a government official, I'll be protected. So if I want to kill people on a regular basis,
right,
for power, I can just join the government, right? Because I have immunity now, and all I have to do is just join the government. And it's sanctioned killings. It's protected murder. As long as you are with the government, you are protected from being charged for war crimes, for genocide, for anything.
This is the bigger issue, I think. Like, this is why I'm wondering, like, we could wrap it up here, but one thing that I'm hoping will come out of these movements that we're seeing for Palestine is that people will be awakened to, like, the similarities between what's happening there to other things that U.S. empire or any kind of oppressive empire is doing, and, like, join in solidarity with people who are trying to affect change there.
Honestly, and because Donald Trump was a catalyst, and it's the only reason why I'm going to say this and why I always say this, the only way I believe, my view, that anything will happen for Palestine or Lebanon is if Donald Trump is the president, because the people are against Donald Trump, right? They will be mobilized naturally by him being in a position of power. Naturally, it happens.
Yeah.
When he gets on stage, people stand up and go do what they're supposed to do. I take these little things and I watch, like, you might not be familiar with Colin Kaepernick with the kneeling down.
Oh, right.
So he knelt down for 1 year, right? No other athletes knelt down with him except for one. I think it was like Michael Thomas or somebody like that. It goes dry. Nobody does anything. He just keeps kneeling down. Donald Trump says you should do something to these whatever he says, right? The conversation is sparked back up, right? Athletes from football, basketball, baseball begin to kneel down, turn their jerseys because Donald Trump said something.
Right. So, like, inadvertently he's going to have this effect.
He has this, he's a catalyst.
Right.
He unites. You saw Muslims and Jews uniting against Donald Trump when he was in office. You saw 3 million women come out against Donald Trump. You watch how many people take action against Donald Trump, right? The Muslim ban, right?
Right.
You saw what happens when he is the guy, right? When it's a career politician, when it's a Kamala Harris, that they have their histories of genocide and murder and the things that they've done in the community. They have that strong history. But people think they're Democrats, or they think that they're safe because this is a career politician. Let them just go and get away with it. Joe Biden has been getting away with it, of sending arms and munitions to Israel. If Donald Trump does the same thing, the reaction will not be the same.
Well, it's almost like their PR is right. The Democrats' PR is right, but they're doing the same thing. Because
they give you welfare, right? They give you issues and things to make you believe that I am with you, right? They're basically caressing you while raping. This other guy is just literally saying, I'm going to, right? And then people go out and say, I don't want to. So let's fight, right? And that's it. I just give you breadcrumbs. Democrats give you breadcrumbs. They give you things that make you feel safe and secure, right? And here's the threat that makes people active. And that's how this country runs.
This has been fascinating, really important discussion. I think we've crossed so many areas. And I think audiences will, I feel.
Yeah, they're going to say I'm out of my mind, right? They're going to say I'm out of my mind.
No, but just, I think it's one of the most like multi-layered discussions I've had for a while on the show, just because like of the intersections or connections you're making between what's happening here with happening in Palestine, what's happening in the party system, what's happening in music. So, no, thank you so much, Karim, for giving us this new insight into the way
all wars are related. That's it. All wars are strictly related. They're in the same category. They have the same perpetrators, and it is for the same reasons. We just have to figure out what those reasons are and what our reasons are, and arm ourselves with information and knowledge and prayer. That's it.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.